Some stories are just timeless. They're about potential, power, and, well, a spectacular collapse. And today, we're digging into one of the big ones. We're talking about the story of Israel's very first king, Saul. His life is seriously one of the most compelling case studies in leadership failure you'll ever find.
So it all really boils down to this one question, right? What makes a leader who has everything going for them fail? Fails spectacularly. As we're going to see, Saul's story gives us some powerful and honestly kind of uncomfortable answers.
And this is him. This is the man at the center of it all. Think about this resume. Chosen by God, anointed by a major prophet, and loved by the people. He literally had everything going for him. So the big question is, how did it all go so wrong? Well, to really get the fall, you have to understand the man he was before he ever wore the crown.
All right, so let's rewind. Before all the drama, before the crown and the kingdom, who even was Saul? Well, he was this pretty unassuming guy from a minor tribe. But what I find so fascinating is how he reacts to his very first brush with destiny. It says a lot.
Okay, so get this. He's just been secretly anointed king by the prophet Samuel. A life-changing moment. He goes back home, and his uncle is like, "So, what happened? What did the prophet say?" And Saul's response, it's so normal, it's almost funny. He just says, "Oh, he told us they found the donkeys." And that's it. That's all he says. He says nothing about the whole being anointed king of Israel thing. Can you even imagine? Most of us would be updating our social media status before we even left the prophet's house. But Saul, he keeps this massive, life-altering secret completely to himself. That shows some incredible humility and self-control right off the bat.
So when you look at the early Saul, he really seems like the ideal candidate. He's modest, he seems devout, and he has this amazing self-mastery. He's not an egomaniac. On paper, he looks like the perfect choice. But potential is one thing. Pressure, that's a whole different ballgame.
And this is where the pressure starts to mount. We're about to see the first major crack appear in his leadership. It's a huge moment of national crisis, and Saul is about to make a decision that will, quite literally, change the course of his reign forever.
So, just picture the scene. The Philistine army, Israel's #1 enemy, is gathered for a massive battle. Saul's own soldiers are terrified. They're literally starting to run away. And his only instruction was to wait 7 days for the prophet Samuel to show up and offer the official sacrifice to God. The problem? Samuel is late. The clock is ticking.
And look at this comparison. It's so stark. The command couldn't have been simpler. Just wait. But Saul's action? It's driven by pure fear and impatience. He completely panics. Instead of trusting that Samuel would show, he takes matters into his own hands, steps into the role of a priest, and offers the sacrifice himself. That's a huge no-no, a direct violation of God's law.
So, of course, Samuel shows up right after, and his rebuke is just devastating. He looks at Saul and says, "You have done a foolish thing." And we need to be clear, this wasn't just a small mistake. It was a massive failure of faith. And the consequence is immediate. Samuel tells him that because of this, his dynasty, his kingdom, will not last. The seeds of his downfall were planted right there.
Okay, if that was the first crack, what comes next is the event that truly seals his fate. And the irony is just, wow. It's a moment where Saul actually wins a huge military victory, but in the process, he loses his kingdom for good. This is the whole story with the Amalekites.
So God's command this time was one of total judgment. It was completely clear, no gray areas. Wipe them out. But look at what Saul actually does. He and his army carry out most of it. They destroy the stuff they think is worthless, but they decide to spare the Amalekite king and all the best livestock. Why? Because they thought they knew better. This is a perfect example of partial obedience, which, let's be honest, is just disobedience with a good PR spin.
And of course, when Samuel shows up and confronts him, does Saul repent? Nope. His first instinct is to make excuses. First, he blames the soldiers. Then he tries to make it sound holy, saying, "Oh, we just saved the best animals so we could sacrifice them to God." It's so clear what's happening. He was more afraid of what his men thought of him than he was of what God commanded.
This right here leads to one of the most famous, most powerful lines in this whole story. Samuel just cuts through all of Saul's excuses and says, "To obey is better than sacrifice." That's it. That's the core principle Saul just could not grasp. God isn't looking for grand religious gestures that are just a cover-up for a disobedient heart. He just wants genuine from-the-heart obedience. Simple as that.
So,
After all this, what's the final consequence for these repeated screw-ups? Well, this is where the story shifts. It's no longer just a warning. It becomes a final, irreversible judgment.
The Bible uses this really powerful, almost human-sounding language here. It says that the Lord was grieved that he'd made Saul king. You might even see translations that say God regretted it. Now, that can be super confusing, right? Like, wait a minute, did God make a mistake? No, not at all. There's a theological term for this. It's called anthropomorphism. It's basically when the Bible uses human emotions or characteristics to help us, as humans, understand a divine truth. So it's not God saying, oops, I messed up. It's a way of expressing this profound sense of divine sorrow and disappointment over Saul's choices. The plan wasn't ruined, but God's heart was grieved by the broken relationship.
And then Samuel lays down the final verdict. There's no coming back from this one. It's a simple and honestly brutal cause and effect statement. Because you rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you from being king. That's it. The kingdom is officially spiritually torn away from him.
So as we wrap this up, what are we supposed to take away from all this? I mean, Saul's legacy is really just a powerful cautionary tale, isn't it? It's this huge, tragic what-if that still kind of echoes for us today.
So let's just boil it down. What are the big lessons from this tragedy? First, insecurity is absolute poison for a leader. Saul was way more afraid of people than he was of God. Second, partial obedience is still disobedience. You just can't pick and choose which parts of the command you feel like following. Third, making excuses and blaming other people is not the same as being sorry and changing. And finally, and this one is huge, character always overrules success. All the battlefield wins in the world couldn't save him from the failures inside himself.
And you know, that really leaves us with a pretty tough question for ourselves, doesn't it? Saul's story kind of forces us to look in the mirror. When the pressure is really on, what's driving your decisions? Is it your principles, or is it perception? Is it about doing what you know is right, or is it about how other people are going to see you? Saul chose perception over principle, and in the end, it cost him absolutely everything.